Number 9. H.L. Hundley. The H.L. Hundley, also known as the CSS Hundley, was the first combat submarine to sink a warship, but its success in doing so came at a major cost. It carried Confederate soldiers into Charleston Harbor for the first time in 1863 as part of a mission to destroy a Union blockade of the city. But something caused it to sink, killing 5 of the men aboard. The sub underwent repairs and was launched again a few months later, but some knucklehead forgot to close a valve and the Hundley sank. The entire 8-man crew died. Once again, the Confederate Navy recovered the vessel and put it back into service. It was launched for a third and final time in early 1864, but vanished along with its crew after sinking the U.S. Navy ship USS Housatonic with a torpedo. The submarine was rediscovered in 1995 by a team of shipwreck hunters. It had come to rest on the seafloor in Charleston Harbor right next to Housatonic. The wreck was raised 5 years later. No one knows what caused the Hundley to sink. The crew may have run out of oxygen and suffocated to death after being pushed around by the tides, according to the non-profit Friends of the Hundley. Another ship may have clipped the sub, or it may have been destroyed by its own torpedo. It's also possible that the captain was somehow disabled by an enemy shooter, causing the vessel to fill with water and drown the crew. But we'll probably never be 100% sure about what doomed the Hundley. Number 8. Glowing wounds. During the spring of 1862, Union soldiers under the command of Ulysses S. Grant camped out near the Tennessee River outside Shiloh while they waited for backup troops to arrive. On the morning of April 6th, a band of Confederate troops launched a surprise attack on the regiment. The battle continued into the night as the backup soldiers arrived. Soon enough, they outnumbered the Confederate unit by over 10,000 men. Medics on both sides of the skirmish were unprepared for the sheer carnage they encountered. It took more than 2 days to remove all the wounded soldiers from the battlefield. As they laid on the ground into the night waiting for help, they saw that some of their injuries had a faint greenish-blue glow. The medics who treated them noticed that the men who reported glowing wounds had a much higher survival rate than those who did not. They also experienced fewer infections, healed faster, and had less scarring. The cause of this so-called angel's glow remained a mystery until 2001, when a teenager named Bill Martin visited the battlefield and learned about the strange symptom. He suspected that luminescent bacteria was responsible and teamed up with his friend John Curtis to investigate further. Their research led them to a glowing bacteria called Photohorabdus luminescens, which lives inside parasitic worms called nematodes. The nematodes live inside insect larvae where they vomit up the bacteria. Bill and John theorized that these nematodes were attracted to insects living in soldiers' wounds, and that the bacteria they threw up caused the glow. The chemicals that were produced in the process killed the insects, which explains the lower infection rates among those with glowing wounds. P. luminescens normally can't survive at human body temperatures, but it was cold enough outside for the injured men to get hypothermia, enabling the bacteria to live in their injuries. John and Bill won first prize that year at the 2001 Intel International Science and Engineering Fair. Number 7. The Gray Ghost of the Confederacy. John Singleton Mosby commanded the 43rd Battalion of the Confederate Army, known as Mosby's Rangers. Based in north-central Virginia, the unit was notorious for its ability to conduct lightning-quick raids and elude Union forces by disappearing and blending in with locals. Most of the men who served under Mosby had no previous military experience, yet they gained a reputation as some of the quickest and cleverest soldiers to fight in the war. In 1863, Mosby and his 29 men captured a Union general, 2 captains, 30 enlisted men, and 58 horses without firing a single shot. He was so good at what he did, he became known as the Gray Ghost of the Confederacy. The commander was also extremely resilient. He returned to the battlefield just a month after being shot in the thigh and spent just 3 weeks recovering after taking a bullet to the groin while taunting a Union regiment on his horse. Mosby suffered his worst wound when a Union commander shot him through the window of a home while he ate with a family. The wound was declared mortal, yet he recovered and returned to the war effort just 2 months later. The Union became so desperate to get its hands on the Gray Ghost, it offered a $5,000 bounty on his head, roughly the equivalent of $90,000 in today's currency. Even then, he managed to avoid capture. His enemies couldn't figure out the secret behind the man's stealth, and even when they were hot on his trail, he seemed to magically slip out of sight. Mosby became one of the last Confederate soldiers to surrender after learning that a warrant for his arrest had been rescinded. He became a lawyer and formed a friendship with his former enemy, Ulysses S. Grant. The cunning ex-commander went on to serve as the American consul to Hong Kong and also worked for the Department of Justice. He died in 1916 at the age of 82. Number 6. Camp Itch. Throughout history, soldiers have dealt with a number of uncomfortable and sometimes deadly conditions and infections. After all, it's difficult to keep up on hygiene while living in the wilderness, and the conditions can also take a toll on the immune system. During the Civil War, a painful skin condition known as camp itch plagued troops on both sides of the battlefield. It appeared early on in the war and worsened as the conflict dragged on, causing severe swelling and blistering of the skin along with uncontrollable itching. And while the mysterious condition sometimes spread from returning soldiers to civilians after the war ended, it had all but disappeared by 1867. Many medical experts at the time were left baffled and unsure of how to treat the symptoms. Some suspected that epidemic scabies was the culprit and managed to successfully treat it with certain medications. But on a large scale, the ailment was extremely difficult, if not impossible, to control. It was also difficult to treat because it was just one of several skin conditions that were known to spread among troops. Researchers got to the bottom of the mystery in 2006 when they reviewed the chronology and documentation of the illness and reasonably concluded that camp itch was in fact epidemic scabies. It might have been easier to control if soldiers were quicker to report the condition and if they were relieved from duty while receiving treatment, but neither scenario was likely, and the torturous ailment pervaded the militaries for the entire war. Number 5. Mystery photos. The Civil War was the first major conflict to be extensively photographed thanks to the technology's increasing popularity at the time. A lot of soldiers carried photos of their loved ones onto the battlefield, only for the pictures to be found on the ground later on. And it was often difficult to identify the picture's owner or the people in the image. One of the so-called mystery photos was found between two dead soldiers, one Union and one Confederate, after the Battle of Port Royal in Virginia. It featured a little girl who remains a mystery to this day. Private Thomas W. Timberlake, the Confederate soldier who discovered the picture, took it with him. It eventually ended up at the Museum of the Confederacy in Richmond, along with several other mystery photographs that were never reclaimed. While it's unlikely that anyone knows who the people in the images are, the museum welcomes any tips that might help identify them. In 2012, it appealed to the public for information about the mystery girl, but the mystery remains unsolved. Who do you think the girl was? Let us know in the comments below, and if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe button if you haven't already. Number 4. The Gettysburg Curse. The Civil War battlefield at Gettysburg is one of the most historic places in the U.S. It's also allegedly one of the country's most cursed and haunted places. There are countless ghost sightings, and it seems like anyone who disturbs the site ends up suffering from serious misfortune, especially if they take rocks from an area called the Devil's Den. One man who visited Gettysburg with his wife in 2006 took 3 small stones as souvenirs. Not long after that, he broke his arm, lost his job and his house, and went to prison for 9 years. His wife left him, but also endured her own string of bad luck in the form of serious health problems. When the man was released from prison, he mailed the rocks back to Gettysburg along with an apology for stealing them. Stolen property is returned to the site every 3 or 4 months and usually arrives with an apologetic letter from the thief, according to Park Ranger Maria Brady, who spoke with the Washington Post in 2016. Regardless of whether or not the rocks are cursed, taking them is against park rules, which is good enough reason to leave them undisturbed. Number 3. Lost Confederate Gold. After the Civil War ended in April 1865, the country needed money to rebuild. The Union set out to seize Confederate assets with its sights set on the losing party's war treasury. Confederate President Jefferson Davis and his government had fled Richmond with a large amount of gold, silver, coins, and jewelry after learning that federal troops were after them. They loaded the goods onto a train and took a separate train southward. Union officials estimated that the fugitives made off with several $1 million worth of valuables. Confederate Navy Captain William H. Parker, who was tasked with protecting the treasure, later claimed that he had no more than $500,000 in his possession when he left Richmond. By then, the Confederacy was more or less going broke, and it makes sense to think that maybe there wasn't so much money left by the time Davis deposited some of it into a bank vault in Georgia for safekeeping. The true value of the hoard will probably never be known. When the Union finally caught up with Davis's party in Irwinville, Georgia, they only had a few dollars on them. The missing treasure was never found. To this day, it continues to inspire myths and legends about what might have happened to it or where it might be. Many believe that the treasure was hidden and that it's still out there, waiting to be discovered. Others think that it was stolen, or that it was divided up among plantation owners. But nobody's been able to prove how a very large amount of money disappeared over the course of roughly 6 weeks and never resurfaced. And if anyone has known of its whereabouts at any point since then, they've done a fantastic job at keeping their mouths shut about it. Number 2. The Ghosts of Kolb's Farm. Civil War folklore is rife with stories of battlefield ghosts, even when it comes to war's smaller and lesser-known skirmishes. Take, for example, the Battle of Kolb's Farm. On June 22, 1864, 14,000 Confederate soldiers under the command of Lieutenant General John B. Hood attacked a 15,000-strong unit of Union fighters near Marietta, Georgia. But Hood's overconfidence backfired on him when poor terrain conditions forced his men to retreat, securing a Union victory. The battle lasted less than a day, but the Confederate death toll was still high at 1,500 lives lost. Houses were eventually built on the property and new residents moved in. It didn't take long for some families to start noticing strange supernatural phenomena. One household has claimed to see a man walking around in their home clad in Civil War-era clothing. They've also experienced mysterious cold sensations and felt invisible hands tugging at their clothing. And when nobody's looking, someone or something has been known to play with the family's power tools. They eventually came to accept the ghost, who seems to be a shy spirit and only causes mischief when he wants attention. The family has learned to peacefully coexist with their uninvited housemate, which is probably a good idea. After all, aside from moving, there's probably not much else they can do. Number 1. Stonewall Jackson's death. Lieutenant General Thomas J. Stonewall Jackson was second in command to Confederate General Robert E. Lee. While returning to camp with a group of his men one night after the Battle of Chancellorsville in 1863, a fellow unit of Confederate fighters mistook them for a Union cavalry force and opened fire. Jackson took 2 bullets to his left arm and 1 in his right hand. His arm was amputated. At first, it seemed as though the general was on the road to recovery, but he contracted pneumonia and died 8 days after being shot. The most commonly accepted version of events holds that Union Major John Berry instructed his troops to shoot at Jackson's group without giving them a chance to identify themselves. But until recently, historians were unable to agree on exactly what caused the confusion that led to the friendly fire. Over time, the story became muddled with claims from people who said they played a role in Jackson's death as a way to piggyback off his fame. Conspiracy theories and suspicions of foul play further obscured the narrative. In 2013, astronomer Don Olson and researcher Lori E. Jasinki calculated the moon's exact position and phase on that fateful night. They also determined exactly where the 2 parties were positioned when the shooting took place and what time it probably happened. Based on those details, it's extremely likely that Jackson would have appeared to Berry and his men as a dark, unrecognizable silhouette. The study marked a major step in solving the mystery and has helped to restore Berry's credibility among those who have doubted that his actions were an honest mistake. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to learn more about Civil War mysteries, let us know in the comments below and be sure to subscribe. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time for another amazing video right here on American Eye.